Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Agents of Dev, our new podcast. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice at Futurum, also a product lead, CTO, product developer, kind of been my background, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about. And I'm joined by my colleague and good friend, Brad Shimmin. Brad, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Mitch. Hi, everybody. So Brad Shimmin, I lead our data intelligence, analytics, and infrastructure practice here. And like Mitch, I have a history and fondness for all things development-oriented. And so the two of us are very glad to be working together on this to talk a little bit about where we think the software development marketplace is going in the enterprise. And, I think we have a great venue for this week, because we're both in Las Vegas visiting AWS, which is putting on its annual reInvent show, which is somewhat sizable. Yeah, Mitch?
It is. And yes, we're working from our hotel rooms. We don't have similar artwork in our homes. So don't worry.
Yeah.
Hey, why do they have the same art? No, yes, we are both at different locations in the wind. It's so just a little bit about this podcast. I want to say since this is episode 1, OG, right, what we're about. I've always wanted to do a more in-depth, both as an analyst, but also as a practitioner, career-long practitioner of someone who's either done software, database work, network work, security work, all of it together to create software, release products, that kind of thing. It's the stuff that you and I have in our backgrounds and respective differences in our backgrounds, but also look at it from an analyst perspective, not just pontificate about it, but pontificate with maybe some informed background, if I can be so bold. Not that other analysts don't do that too. I don't mean to discourage anyone, but you know what I mean. We're practitioners. We like to talk about the craft of what we're covering.
And the pain as well.
Oh my God. And the pain. Yes. And AI doesn't lessen pain. There are some new pains. I think
That's right.
So, I think Brad and I we both like to have fun. So you'll hear us joking around, and hopefully some levity will make this even more interesting. Talk a little bit about your software background. Just like to hear a little bit about it, Brad, so folks know where you're coming from.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So back in the day, which was for me 1990, when I was just, getting into working as an adult, not as a teenager, but as an adult. And I got a job as an admin for a Novell network, and that was painful. Speaking of, if you've ever thought about doing an upgrade of a system that had over 50 floppy disks, there's your answer.
SPX protocol in the background there going on.
Indeed. Yeah, and NLMs were my friends.
Yes.
I still dream about them, but in that era, it was heady times. I was trying to teach myself DB2 and got involved with sort of interesting, what would I call this, sort of development paradigms like Fox Pro, which was basically a tool set and an approach to building databases, and I was hooked, just absolutely hooked. Loved them very much, and ever since then have been working as I actually started working in this Atlanta Times magazine, doing competitive reviews, switching reviews, networking reviews, as well as server and software reviews. And I always raised my hand whenever we had the chance to do anything with software and software development, because it's just always fascinated me. And so I did that for a while, did some work as an actual in IT itself as a business analyst and developer when I was working at a company called McGraw-Hill and CMP and whatever else they were called at the time, publishing houses. And for example, we had an interesting project where we wanted to take the databases that we built for each magazine and converge them into one harmonious database. And these databases were all the the cards that people used to fill out back in the days for these massive, and I mean massive, like the page size was about this big.
You mean the
And
cards that I made up all the answers on? Those cards?
exactly right. Yes, right.
You got your subscription.
Surprisingly, there was a data quality problem involved in that project,
Sorry
but
to contribute to that.
yeah, just so I've been involved in that for forever, and as an industry analyst, was on board of the AI train pretty early, and got involved as a practitioner there and in doing data science, and have since we entered the agentic era, been working on several projects that we're doing actually internally here at Futurum, uh, making use of some of the new toys that we have in the industry right now.
Yeah, you undersell yourself on that part of it. Brad's been leading the development of our Signal project, the Signal report, which is all agentic AI, created the structured and created sort of the fabric behind it of taking the input from the analysts and creating the structure of what the analysis looks like and sources and kind of directing it. But Brad's done all the work on building it. You've done a fantastic job. Admire what you did on that. So nice work, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Just real quick, kind of where I'm coming from. I've in my own way, similar kind of path. I started out a decade earlier than you did in the finance industry, doing banking systems, actually rebuilding, modernizing, I guess you would call it now, from one vendor to another, moving software into IBM mainframes. But I also got into the PC era in college, so was very invested in that, and actually ended up getting into database pretty quick. First IMS, the mainframe stuff, and then DB2 and Ingress, and later Postgres and things like that. Interestingly enough, about 6 years into my career, I got into AI and was doing a lot of Lisp and Prolog work,
Ooh,
which we don't use a lot of
lovely.
these days. But that's what we thought of as those were symbolic languages, right, for AI, and actually did some teaching around that stuff. And so
Well,
I think
Lisp is God's language.
it is, ISA. Everything's about an ISA.
That's right. Yeah.
So kind of had early hand on that. We thought, AI was just around the corner then, but not quite. So anyway, long story short, went through the client server era, moved into the the .com .bomb era, but also moving into the cloud. So I was a DBA data architect for a while. I was a system architect developer for a while, and I got into networking kind of by accident in a consulting company that I started, and that got me into security. I ended up doing a couple of
Mm.
security companies in the early 2000s that sold to the DoD and to corporate enterprises, and did pretty well in that era. So I ended up working in security for the last 20 plus years. But anyway, after that, still kept going on and moved into the next era of the cloud and DevOps and things like that, leading product development teams, just still a little bit of hand in development. And then started an analyst firm that eventually got bought and then sold again to what's now Futurum. So that's how Brad and I came to work together. So we both come to this as with strong practitioner background, but also analytic thinking about what we're doing and why we're doing it this way, and kind of wanting to understand it better. And I think that's a lot of what I'm guessing similarly wires us about why is analyst work interesting.
Yeah, the insatiable curiosity is a problem, well, within the analyst community, and it does keep us up at nights thinking about, well, wait a minute, they so and so said such and such about this new technology. How does that work exactly? What does that do?
You say that because there's one word that's a question and a statement. Whenever I hear something said by someone, especially because I've been on the vendor side too, when they tell me this is what we're doing or we're announcing this, it's either really, which is a statement, or really, which is a question. Really, I want to know more, right?
Exclamation point followed by a question mark, or question mark followed by an exclamation point.
Or multiple of either. So it's that natural curiosity we have. So let's turn to kind of, we want to talk about as practical things as analysts are going to talk about, but kind of dig into the more of the details of what's going on. We're here at reInvent. We've had some pre-briefings. But frankly, we're at before the main keynotes have been kicked off. So we've had the preview. We have what they have told us, and as much as we can digest in that shorter period of time. Do you want to kick off with some initial thoughts about what we've heard and what that's saying about teeing up where we're headed into 2026, and then I'll chime in and kind of give my perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So, as Mitch said, we actually just a couple of hours ago sat down with AWS to hear a sort of roundup of where they were heading this week and all of the announcements that we would hear about for everyone who's following here or at home. And as you might think, trying to cram all of that into just a couple of hours, not easy or even possible. And so there's a lot that they really glossed over. But I think sometimes when a vendor does that, they actually tell you a lot, because what they omit and what they elevate is always, important, because that tells you where the investment is going within the company, what they care about the most. And it was interesting to hear, some very familiar refrains from them that we've had for a long time. Things like, we're all about working backwards from the customer to the problem, and so that they build software that's built for their customers. And AWS has always been very good at that, as most vendors, I think, really try to do it. But what I liked what I heard, which was a little bit different this year, was they have a focus on what they're calling freedom to reinvent. And that is a key go-to-market message for them this year. And I think that what they told us about does reflect that in some ways, because normally I would say it doesn't, but I do think that AWS, what they're saying actually is very much in line with their go-to-market. And let me give you an example. So they talk about how they think that we're going to have a world in which there are billions of AI agents running around, and they, as sort of proof of that, they said, well, we're hearing this from our customers, and we're seeing what our partners are building and what we are building, AWS, internally, and we see that there is a tremendous amount of work being done right now to build out a large swath of agents. And when you build out a large swath of agents, you have to Mitch, manage them. Might be a good thing to do.
Orchestrate. That's the word. Yes.
Orchestrate. Yes. Yeah. Right. There are frameworks built specifically to do that with agents. And that whole idea of freedom to reinvent, what the thing that constrains enterprises from really, doing anything is, inertia and technical debt and budget. If you don't have those things, you're going to have a hard time making headway on new projects and old problems. And so the things that they were telling us during this roundup of what they were working on, I think really kind of speak to that desire that AWS has to help their customers get to those billions of agents, and to do so using the existing platform they have. Like, they have their Bedrock platform, and they have a not new but a greatly enhanced orchestration layer that they lovingly refer to as Agent Core, which does remind Mitch and I both of a musical movement that involves punk rock. But that's a story perhaps for another day.
I kind of remember that. Some of those brain cells are still here, but yes.
those are heady times. And if you think about what they're trying to get at here is being able to build out very complex systems that involve a large number of semi-autonomous or fully autonomous workloads. And that's not something the enterprise is used to doing. So it's very different. So I hear when they say freedom to reinvent, and I say, okay, we AWS are trying to give our customers, the enterprises, the tools that they can use to reinvent themselves in this agentic era that we're existing in. What was your key takeaway from that opening salvo?
Definitely agree with your take on things. No, thematically, especially, that's what they were building around. I think it's hard for AWS because I count the number. There's always 800 to 1,000 announcement at a reInvent. They're just
No doubt.
How do you thematically pull that together? But so you have to look at, so what are the big things that they're talking about? And you mentioned Agent Core. They have something that they've introduced with that, but also part of their Kiro IDE, AI IDE, which clearly is now becoming sort of the working console for development. Think of it as not just an IDE, but they have a spec-driven mantra or philosophy about how Kiro works, rather than just task or prompt, generator driven kind of development, and something that's a little more structured. And I think that's one of the things for us to kind of figure out too. Sorry, my computer's dinging at me, which means our 10-minute bell just went off. If you haven't guessed, sorry everyone. Oh, behind the scenes there. So anyway, jumping into it, they're talking about something called basically frontier agents. Now, this is a bit of a washing of the frontier name. It's not frontier. Sorry, I just heard your stomach grumble there, Brad.
Yeah, those were my eyes rolling back in my head,
Oh,
is what you
that
might have
like
heard.
them hitting the back of your head and rolling back forward. We heard that.
Yes.
Okay. So, now frontier won't mean as much, sort of like agentic means everything or whatever. But so it's going to get washed too. But it's bound to happen. Anything that's good will get adopted
Yep.
and
Exactly that.
changed. So but the essence of it is as I understand it, we'll hear more about it as the week goes on. It's really about agents who are more truly agentic, meaning they're running on their own. They don't require as much human interaction direction to keep them going on track, keeping on track to accomplish a task. They can be long running. It can be not just hours, but days, maybe multiple days, going across models using the tools that they have for them to use. But I think the idea with the frontier branding is signaling going to the next step, to the kind of work that agents can do on behalf of whatever those tasks are. And then they folded those into a set of kind of predefined agents that they're offering. One of them was a security agent.
Yeah, that was
Uh,
fascinating.
yes, of course. And Fernando, one of our peers, and his first question is, "Yeah, but do I trust it?" The farther you go in this software development lifecycle, the higher the trust, has to be, because those are the folks that live with it when it breaks
But,
most
do
often.
you find it interesting, man, that we talk about trust and talk about opacity and wanting transparency and understanding, and yet, as an industry, and especially for software development, have we not at every possible moment added a layer of abstraction to what we're doing to try to make it easier, better, faster to get to the outcome? So how can we even talk about trust as being some sort of foundational core that we can ever truly know? Can we ever truly have that?
Oh, you hear stories about compilers, those are bad things because I know what I can code everything I need to do in assembly language on whatever platform
Right.
those compilers, I don't trust those things, right?
They're
So
they're magical, but they work.
I don't know what to do unless I understand. It is that I have to get past this kind of stage. I went through that with code generators too, and you have this point where okay, I'm not going to modify what it does. I'm just going to use what it does, and if it doesn't do it, I'll either figure out how to make it do it or make a workaround if I need to do it until the time being that it does actually work, and it will. We'll get past that point.
So you believe then,
Oh,
if
I
I
do.
if I if I
I
may,
believe. I'm a believer. No, I'm sorry. You
do
didn't.
you
I didn't say your
you
question.
believe that, with LLMs, or, perhaps it could be anything, is, not just transformers, but other AI, that we can ever reach the stage where we are now with compilers, that we could look at this black box that is a deep learning neural network and see the outcome the same way that we see the outcome from a compiler, in just looking at whatever Pythonic code that we've written and turning it into actual stuff that the computer can run.
I do. I do. Not just on faith, because the pattern has been there before, right?
Mm,
We
mm.
trust machine learning today, right? Because we've gone through this learning curve of how to effectively take PyTorch or whatever platform that we're using to figure out the process of, it's not just about writing the algorithms, it's about grooming the code and creating features. And there's a process to this, right? It's a different way of creating software. Um, we were that way about DevOps. I'm not automating
Yeah.
this stuff. I'm not. okay, I'll do a continuous integration, but I'm not going to do continuous deployment, or at least maybe even automated deployment, because I'm the one left holding the bag if it doesn't work. Well, you start to make it work, and you start to build trust in it. I think trust is experience. As you get experience
Yeah, I
with
like
something,
that.
that's what builds trust. And unless it turns out to be a hokum and just a full of smoke AI baloney, which I don't think it is, I think that trust will go over. Now it's going to be oversold. It's going to be overpromised. It's going to underdeliver. It's going to do all those things that everything that goes through a hype cycle does. But we all know that. So, and even if we want it to work, we know it won't be perfect, and it's got to go through some maturation. So that's my answer to yes. I do believe it's gonna work for us.
Yeah, I feel the same way as you, and I think that what gives me hope that that's how this will play out is that we're changing how we measure, rightness, correctness, accuracy, etc., in the agentic AI era, or just the transformer generative AI era in particular. And it's changing a little bit about our expectations because you have the trade-offs of flexibility for accuracy. And if you can accommodate percentage points of lack of accuracy in trade for the ability to adapt to unknowable situations, oh goodness, why wouldn't you do it? So I think that it's heartening for me to see, companies like AWS really trying to push and I'm not saying this on purpose, frontiers of how we think about software here. And I feel like they were very early on. I don't know if they get a lot of credit for this, and they should, because they were really early to the agentic orchestration problem inside of Bedrock. I remember meeting with them 2 years ago down in New York, and they walked us through, this very detailed roadmap of how they were going to build Bedrock out to accommodate and support agentic development. So I feel like they don't get a lot of credit, and I do think that they are, if there is a company that understands infrastructure and they understand software as infrastructure, apps as infrastructure, they're in a good spot to do it.
Yep, I agree. I think we're going through, analogies can be useful things. This is analogous to us going through microservices, cloud
Ooh, yeah,
kind of architecture, right? Where, and picture it, thousands, millions, maybe billions of microservices, smaller, doing kind of special purpose, more axiom kind of functionality. How are you going to manage that stuff? Well,
right,
something gets invented. Kubernetes comes along, and
right,
in that case, it's an open source that is the dominant player. I don't know that we're going to have that dominant answer, but the orchestration layers of what IBM is doing, Microsoft is doing, you name it, AWS, Google, everybody is working on this. I think we're setting ourselves up for, okay, how does that all sort itself out? Am I going to live in a world where I've got 25 things trying to control all the agents, or do I live in a world where there's two or three? We'll see what that looks like. But that's kind of that maturation that we're going through. Today, we don't think that, hey, yeah, another app's been containerized. Another app's now starting to use microservices. Another one's been greenfield and built. Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, we
yeah.
trust? We do now. We didn't in the beginning, but that's part of that process.
Well, and we also self-correct too, in thinking about containerization and microservices in particular. In that era, the early noughties, we were like, yeah, everything's going to be a microservice. You're not going to build monolithic software anymore. And we discovered that, well, there is some truth to it, but not total truth to that idea. And I think we'll see the same thing with agentic, development. I think that we'll see, places where it makes the most sense and places where it needs other things. For example, rules engines, for instance, if you're trying to have something that's a little less probabilistic. But that's all, like you said, man, that's all just maturation. And I see that reflected in a lot of what AWS is talking about, particularly with the agents that it was built, the ones that you were just mentioning, Mitch, about the frontier agents, and also with Kiro itself. And my goodness, you said that this is a full philosophical approach, and AWS is actually committed to building its software on top of Kiro or using Kiro, which may sound extreme, but it's really not. I mean, it is VS Code with things that do other things in it. So it's not a complete makeover of how we build software, but
What?
I
You're
think
using VS Code? No. Yes, open source, like everyone else. Yes.
that's right. That's right. Everything cursor, it's all the same. But it is, I think, representative or reflective of this sort of changing ideals of how we build software. And I want to talk for a second, if you don't mind, a little bit about one of those with those long running processes. I remember, and this is actually, a function of frontier scale models, where when OpenAI was talking about long running processes for things like trying to discover a new, molecule, as probably the best example is, that's not something that you do a deep, what a deep research, query for 10 minutes and get your answer on. It's going to run for a long time.
Mhm.
And what AWS shared with us this morning, and what we'll hear a lot about this week, is this sort of shift away from, having just individual, developers solving small problems to perhaps, these long running agentic processes that are solving more complex problems, bigger problems. Maybe it's, just migrating everything from .NET to something else in the company. I don't know.
Well, we're at the beginning of this journey, both on the podcast and also AWS. They're both are long running processes, but like
Yeah.
Frontier Age, we'll do our episode 2 and do kind of a recap, pick up where we are now, but also I'll touch on some other areas. There's agents for Kira itself for the development process. There's an AWS DevOps agent. There's also they're doing now train your own model using AWS's models in your data. There's a lot of things that will come along that we'll talk about as part of the announcements on episode 2. Uh, I think one of the things we wanted to structurally do in the podcast is wrap up with. So, what's on your mind for the next week? What are you thinking about? I may have made you go first on these, so I'll kick things off.
Okay,
Uh,
go for it.
I'll,
I'll think. I'll think.
I'll take one for the team this time. Um, in the analyst world, I try to look at it as it's not about any single announcement. It's about what are these things that a vendor, AWS in this case, or anybody else, Microsoft at Ignite, et cetera, what is that setting this up for in the next 6 to 12 months? Because let's face it, that's looking too far down the horizon of what technically is happening is a bit problematic, other than seeing vendors kind of leapfrog each other with the same things, but as they take on new challenges. So that's what I'm trying to think of. Okay, so this is the big event, not for the end of 2025, but the beginning of 2026. And so, well, I'll try to share some thoughts about that when we get together. How about what's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about, what can and what cannot be automated with generative agentic AI. That's what my mind is really trying to wrap itself around right now. Is as you mentioned, we're both practitioners and working on some projects, and one of those is trying to work out how to do competitive intelligence and what does that look like. And if for those of you listening that know anything about this, the analyst industry itself, competitive intelligence is this sort of long hated but deeply respected area of investment within companies that are trying to compete. And you know generative AI, like with so many areas that involve, how do you take a lot of information and correlate and analyze and surface value from that information, is really good at it. So I'm trying to think about, what would actually be automatable and how far could you take that with, gaining value, and how could that be operationalized to work across several disparate competitive areas. So like, having how does, Kiro, line up with Bob from IBM? How do they compete when you talk about things like spec driven developments? what does that mean? You could say they have spec-driven development, but to really dig into, how it's being implemented, that's the heart of competitive intelligence, and it's not that easy to do. But I really feel like we can, with the tools we have even now, at least, surface enough value to make directional statements from it. So that's what I'm thinking about.
It's a good juxtaposition: intent-driven development versus spec-driven. Are they the same? Are they different? What's the something? One's got a better approach or not? We'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. Good.
Yeah.
You think about big problems. I think you and I like to do that. Like, what is all this
Unsolvable.
life meaning of life?
Indeed, indeed.
Deep thought. All right. An old reference. So we'll figure out an email address folks can use to contact us. In the meantime, you can reach out at mashley@futurumgroup.com or Shimmin at futurumgroup.com. We're happy to take your ideas on episodes, comment on wherever you listen to this, or see us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know if this is interesting or what questions you have. What are you thinking about? As either developers or people involved in software development, or people architecting solutions, or people building products for the market, so especially who we talk to a lot. We look forward to chatting with you there. Parting thought before we sign off, Brad?
Yeah, just glad we're doing this, Mitch. I think that there's so much going on in in this industry right now that is I think very hopeful in terms of making better software and more software, because I think you can never have enough software. I think we need more.
There's a self-fulfilling prophecy, if ever.
Indeed.
All right, my friend. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on episode 2, and stay tuned for more. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.